In the sweltering summer of 1977, New York City was on edge. The streets buzzed with fear and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. A faceless killer who called himself the Son of Sam was striking at random, attacking young couples, leaving behind cryptic letters, and taunting the police who were desperate to catch him. This wasn't just another crime story. It was a nightmare that gripped one of the world's largest cities, turning ordinary nights into scenes of terror. People stopped going out, lovers avoided sitting in parked cars, headlines screamed warnings, and the city felt cursed by a man who claimed to be following orders from a demon-possessed dog. But behind the chilling nickname and the twisted mythology was a man, David Berkowitz. His story is one of loneliness, obsession, and a descent into darkness that would leave 6 people dead, 7 wounded, and an entire city forever scarred. This is the story of the Son of Sam. In the summer of 1977, New York City was living in fear. A faceless killer lurked in the shadows, striking without warning, leaving behind blood, chaos, and a city trapped in terror. Newspapers screamed his name, Son of Sam. For more than a year, ordinary men and women feared to walk the streets at night. Lovers stopped sitting in cars at quiet places. Strangers looked over their shoulders with suspicion. And the police, one of the largest and most experienced forces in America, struggled to catch a man who seemed to kill for pleasure. But who was this mysterious figure? And how did one man manage to hold one of the world's biggest cities hostage with fear? To understand the story of Son of Sam, we need to start long before the murders. We need to go back to the childhood of the man behind the monster, David Berkowitz. Early life of David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz was born on June 1, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York. His birth name was Richard David Falco. His biological parents were not married. His mother, Betty Broder, had an affair with a married man named Joseph Kleinman. Afraid of scandal and unable to raise a child, Betty gave him up for adoption. At just a few days old, the baby was adopted by a Jewish couple, Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. They were working-class people who lived in the Bronx. Nathan was a hardware store clerk, and Pearl was a devoted homemaker. The couple could not have children of their own, so when David came into their lives, they loved him dearly. Yet, despite their care, young David was troubled. From early childhood, teachers noticed he was difficult to handle. He was hyperactive, restless, and often angry. By the age of 5, he was already showing signs of aggression. He bullied other children and sometimes killed small animals, behavior that psychologists often recognize as an early warning of deeper problems. David's adoptive mother, Pearl, tried her best to give him a stable home. But when she died of cancer in 1967, David was only 14 years old. Her death devastated him. He grew bitter and resentful, blaming the world for his pain. After Pearl's death, Nathan remarried, but David never truly accepted his stepmother. His relationship with his adoptive father grew strained. David felt abandoned, misunderstood, and increasingly isolated. Teenage years and the army as a teenager. David's anger deepened. He often skipped school and spent time wandering the streets of New York. He began to develop a fascination with fires and violence. Neighbors would later remember him as a boy who seemed strange, someone who was always off. In 1971, at the age of 18, David joined the U.S. Army. He served in South Korea for 3 years as a rifleman. During his service, he learned how to handle weapons with deadly accuracy. But even in the Army, he did not escape his inner demons. Fellow soldiers said he was moody, withdrawn, and obsessed with violent thoughts. In 1974, Berkowitz was honorably discharged and returned to New York. But instead of finding purpose, he sank deeper into loneliness. He worked at low-paying jobs, including as a letter sorter for the U.S. Postal Service. By this time, he had already begun to develop bizarre beliefs that demons and evil forces were influencing his mind. By 1975, David's mental state had deteriorated further. He started setting fires across New York City, later confessing to hundreds of arsons. But fire was only the beginning. His violent fantasies grew darker, and soon he moved from setting flames to hunting people. The first murders on the night of July 29, 1976, New York City's long nightmare began. It was just past 1:00 a.m. in the Bronx. Two young women, Donna Loria and her friend Jody Valenti, were sitting in Jody's car, talking outside Donna's apartment building. They had just returned from a disco, and like many New Yorkers, lingered in the car for a late-night chat. Suddenly, a man approached. He pulled a gun from a paper bag and fired. Donna, just 18 years old, was killed instantly with a bullet to her chest. Jody was struck in the thigh but survived. The attack was shocking, but at first, police thought it was just another random act of violence in a city already struggling with crime. No one knew this was only the beginning. The next shooting 3 months later, on October 23, 1976, in Queens, 20-year-old Carl Denaro and his date, Rosemary Keenan, were parked in a car, talking quietly. Suddenly, the windows exploded with gunfire. Carl was struck in the head, but miraculously, he survived. Rosemary escaped unharmed. Police were puzzled. Two attacks, both involving young couples in cars, both late at night, but no clear motive. November 1976, Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lomino, on November 27, 1976, two teenage girls, Donna DeMasi, 16, and Joanne Lomino, 18, were walking home in Queens. A man approached them on the street, pulled out a revolver, and fired. Donna was wounded, but Joan was shot in the back and left paralyzed for life. The city was horrified. Random young women were being attacked for no reason. The shooter was still unknown, and the pattern was becoming clear. Young women, often with long dark hair, were his targets. January 1977, the Columbia students on the cold night of January 30, 1977, in Queens, two college students, Christine Freund and her fiancé John Deal, were sitting in a car near a railroad station. Out of nowhere, bullets ripped through the vehicle. Christine was shot twice and died later in the hospital. John survived, though deeply traumatized. By now, newspapers were starting to connect the dots. 4 attacks, 2 dead, and several wounded, all within 6 months. New York City was beginning to realize there was a serial shooter on the loose. March 1977. Another attack on March 8, 1977, 19-year-old Virginia Voskerichian, a student at Columbia University, was walking home from class in Queens. She was just a few feet from her house when a stranger approached. He pulled a .44 caliber revolver and fired into her face. She died instantly. This killing terrified the city like never before. Virginia was not in a car. She wasn't with a date. She was simply walking home from school. It meant no one was safe, not couples, not students, not anyone. The killer's calling card by this time, police discovered something chilling. The bullets recovered from the crime scenes were all fired from the same type of weapon. A .44 caliber Charter Arms Bulldog revolver. The newspapers gave him a name, the .44 caliber killer. The press followed every shooting with sensational headlines. Panic spread across the 5 boroughs. Beauty salons reported women cutting and dyeing their hair blonde, afraid of being targeted if they had long dark hair. Couples avoided sitting in cars late at night. The city's nightlife began to fade. A monster was out there, and no one knew when he would strike again. The letters and the rise of Son of Sam. By the spring of 1977, New York City was on edge. 6 attacks in less than a year, dozens wounded, and 5 dead. The newspapers were filled with fear. Every young couple sitting in a parked car, every young woman with dark hair, wondered if they might be the next target. And then, suddenly, the killer spoke. The first letter, April 1977. On April 17, 1977, in the Bronx, 20-year-old Alexander Esau and his girlfriend Valentina Suriani were sitting in their car near her home. Out of the shadows, a man appeared and opened fire. Valentina died instantly. Alexander was rushed to the hospital but died hours later. This was horrific enough. But what truly shook the city was what police found nearby. Just a few blocks from the murder scene, investigators discovered a handwritten letter addressed to NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli. It was left near the bodies, almost like a signature. The letter was chilling. In rambling, almost childlike handwriting, the killer mocked the police and called himself Son of Sam. He wrote, "I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I love to hunt. I love to kill." The letter claimed that demons had ordered him to kill, that he was enslaved to a violent voice inside his head. The killer promised he would strike again, and soon. For the first time, the city knew. This was no ordinary murderer. This was someone who craved attention, who wanted to be feared. The birth of a name the press had already been calling him, the .44 caliber killer. But the moment the letter became public, a new name spread like wildfire: Son of Sam. It Sam was a terrifying identity, almost biblical, like something out of a nightmare. Newspapers splashed the name across their front pages. TV news anchors repeated it night after night. Suddenly, Son of Sam wasn't just a criminal, he was a legend of fear. The city in panic after the letter was released. Panic in New York reached new levels. Women lined up in beauty salons to cut their long dark hair short, hoping to avoid fitting the killer's pattern. Couples stopped parking in lovers' lanes at night. Some people refused to leave their apartments after sunset. Gun sales in the city skyrocketed, as ordinary citizens armed themselves for protection. The NYPD launched one of the largest manhunts in its history. Over 200 detectives were assigned to the Operation Omega Task Force. They worked long shifts, combing through leads, interviewing witnesses, and testing thousands of .44 revolvers. But still, the Son of Sam remained a ghost. The taunting continues on May 30, 1977, just weeks after the Esau Suriani murders. The New York Daily News received another handwritten letter. This time, it was addressed directly to columnist Jimmy Breslin, one of the city's most famous journalists. The letter was even stranger than the first. "Hello from the gutters of Nye Sea, which are filled with dog manure, vomit, stale wine, urine, and blood." It rambled on about demons, blood, and death. The killer claimed he could not stop killing, that he was programmed to do it. He signed it once again, Son of Sam. When the Daily News published parts of the letter, circulation exploded. Everyone wanted to read the words of the mysterious killer. It was as if the Son of Sam had become a twisted celebrity, hated, feared, but endlessly fascinating. The summer of 1977, as June turned into July, the fear reached boiling point. The killer was still free, the letters had made him more famous than ever, and the summer heat only added to the tension in the streets. People whispered to each other in bars, on the subway, in schools, "When will he strike again? Who will be next?" New York City was holding its breath, and on a hot July night in 1977, Son of Sam would unleash his most infamous attack of all. The summer of fear and the final shooting by July 1977, New York City was living in a nightmare. The killer now had a name. His letters were printed in newspapers. His face was unknown, but his shadow was everywhere. He could be anyone, a neighbor, a co-worker, the man sitting across from you on the subway. And then came one of the darkest nights in the city's history. The blackout of 1977 on July 13, 1977. A massive power outage struck New York City. A massive power outage struck New York City. The entire city went dark for 25 hours. In the chaos, looting and arson erupted. Over 1,600 stores were looted and more than 10 fires were set. Amid this chaos, one fear dominated every New Yorker's mind. What if Son of Sam strikes tonight? He didn't. But the blackout only deepened the city's sense of vulnerability. It felt like New York itself was falling apart, and Son of Sam was the symbol of that collapse. July 31, 1977, the final attack. On the night of July 31, 1977, two young lovers, Stacy Moskowitz, 20, and Robert Violante, 20, were sitting in Robert's car in Brooklyn. They had just finished a date at the movies. Around 2:30 a.m., a man walked up to the passenger side of the car, pulled out a revolver, and fired. Stacy was shot in the head. She died hours later in the hospital. Robert was blinded for life. This was Son of Sam's last attack, but no one knew it at the time. To New Yorkers, it felt like the nightmare would never end. The crucial witness. What Berkowitz didn't know was that this time, he had left behind a trail. A woman named Cecilia Davis, who lived near the shooting site, reported something unusual. Just before the shots were fired, she saw a man acting strangely, loitering near cars, ripping up traffic tickets in frustration. She even saw him driving away in a cream-colored Ford Galaxy. She reported this to the police. At first, it seemed like just another lead in a sea of thousands. But when investigators checked traffic records, they discovered that a man named David Berkowitz had recently received a parking ticket near the scene of the Moskowitz shooting. For the first time, detectives had a concrete name. Closing in, over the next week, investigators quietly began watching Berkowitz's movements. They discovered he lived in Yonkers, just north of New York City. When police looked at his car, they spotted something that confirmed their suspicions: a rifle sitting in the back seat. They obtained a search warrant, but before they could execute it, the officers decided to wait outside his apartment. They wanted to be sure. On the night of August 10, 1977, David Berkowitz walked out of his Yonkers building and headed to his car. Police surrounded him. Inside his vehicle, they found maps of the crime scenes, a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, and a note addressed to the NYPD promising more killings. The nightmare was finally over. The arrest, confession, and trial. The arrest on the night of August 10, 1977. Outside his Yonkers apartment building, David Berkowitz was finally in police custody. Detectives approached him cautiously, unsure if the man might resist or attack. But Berkowitz didn't fight. He smiled strangely, almost as if he had been waiting for this moment. One of the officers reportedly said, "You know why we're here." Legacy and cultural impact. The Summer of Fear. Remembered, the summer of 1977 became one of the darkest chapters in New York City's history. For over a year, David Berkowitz's attacks created a wave of fear that touched every neighborhood. Even today, older New Yorkers who lived through that time remember the anxiety, the empty streets after dark. Women cutting and dyeing their hair blonde just to feel safer, couples avoiding parked cars, knowing they might be the next target. Son of Sam didn't just kill 6 people, he changed the behavior of millions. Son of Sam laws. Berkowitz's capture also changed American law. When rumors spread that he might sell his story to publishers or filmmakers, public outrage followed. New York quickly passed the Son of Sam law in 1977, ensuring that criminals could not profit from their crimes. The law became a model for other states and showed how one case could reshape legal systems. Berkowitz calmly replied, "No, why?" The officer answered, "Because you're Son of Sam." And with a chilling smirk, Berkowitz said, "Well, you got me." The confession at police headquarters. Berkowitz quickly confessed. There was no dramatic denial, no attempt to hide the truth. He openly admitted to being the Son of Sam and described the murders in disturbing detail. But what shocked investigators most was why he claimed to have killed. Berkowitz said he was obeying voices, specifically, the voice of a demon that spoke through his neighbor's dog, a black Labrador named Harvey. According to him, Harvey was possessed and demanded blood. It sounded insane, but Berkowitz insisted it was true. He said he was just the servant of darker forces, that he had no choice but to kill. The media frenzy news of Berkowitz's arrest exploded across the world. Newspapers splashed his face on the front page. TV stations ran non-stop coverage. The mysterious phantom killer now had a real identity, a 24-year-old postal worker living quietly in Yonkers. Neighbors were stunned. Many described him as odd, lonely, but never dangerous. A man who kept to himself, worked at the post office and seemed unremarkable, yet he had terrorized the biggest city in America. The trial in May 1978, less than a year after his arrest, David Berkowitz pleaded guilty to 6 murders and numerous attempted murders. There was no long trial, no dramatic jury decision. He admitted everything. During the hearings, he sometimes smiled, sometimes laughed, sometimes spoke about demons and voices. His behavior convinced many that he was deeply disturbed. The court sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison for each murder, 6 consecutive life sentences. That meant he would never walk free again. Inside prison, even after his sentencing, Berkowitz's story continued to twist. At first, he claimed the demon dog story was real. Later, he admitted it had been partly fabricated, saying he just wanted to create chaos and gain attention. In prison, he experienced a religious conversion and declared himself a born-again Christian. He began calling himself the Son of Hope, writing letters to supporters and urging young people to stay away from violence. But for many New Yorkers, those words meant little. To them, he would always be the Son of Sam, the man who turned their city into a hunting ground. Aftermath, the Son of Sam case also led to lasting legal changes. In the early 1980s, New York passed the Son of Sam laws, which prevented criminals from profiting by selling their stories to books or movies. These laws were designed to stop Berkowitz from making money off his fame. Even decades later, the scars remained. Families of the victims never recovered fully. Survivors carried lifelong injuries, and the name, Son of Sam, stayed etched in the dark history of New York. Media and pop culture. The Son of Sam murders also transformed the relationship between crime and the media. Newspapers like the New York Daily News saw record sales when they printed his letters. Television stations used sensational headlines to capture viewers. This created a debate. Was the press simply informing the public, or were they feeding Berkowitz's ego by giving him fame? In the years since, Son of Sam has been referenced in books, films, TV series, and even music. Spike Lee's movie Summer of Sam, 1999, dramatized the fear of that summer. 1999, dramatized the fear of that summer. Countless documentaries and podcasts continue to retell the story. The fear of the unknown, perhaps the most lasting impact, was psychological. The Son of Sam murders showed how one unknown figure could bring an entire city to its knees, not just through violence, but through fear itself. Every New Yorker looked over their shoulder in 1977. Every stranger was suspicious. It wasn't only about bullets. It was about the loss of safety, the idea that evil could be anywhere. David Berkowitz today, decades later, David Berkowitz remains in prison, serving 6 life sentences. Now in his 70s, he spends his time writing letters, reading the Bible, and describing himself as Son of Hope. But for the world outside, he will never escape his true identity. To history, he will always be the Son of Sam. Conclusion: the story of Son of Sam is not just about one killer. It is about a city already weakened by poverty, crime, and blackout chaos, suddenly facing a nightmare it could not control. It is about how fear can spread faster than violence. It is about how one man, with one gun, can scare the memory of millions. New York eventually recovered. The city grew safer, stronger, and more resilient. But the echoes of 1977 remain, and in the shadows of history, the name Son of Sam still whispers, a reminder of the summer when the city that never sleeps lay awake in terror.